The Ring of Death nerf was definitely needed because, let's be honest, it was a bit overpowered. However, they nerfed it so badly that it's pretty much useless now, and Jagex has a track record of nerfing items from being very overpowered to pretty much useless, and that's a problem. Let's talk about it. Yo, what's going on guys? My name's Chevalric, and today we're going to be talking about the Ring of Death nerf and mainly the bigger discussion that sparks it, with Jagex releasing things in a broken state, then nerfing it into oblivion, and then it just being useless or very niche uses before any PVMer commented, yes, I know it is still useful some places, but it's not just as useful as it used to be, and I'm pretty sure you're better just off using any other ring now, unless in very specific situations. However, I do want to know your opinion in the comment section down below. Do you think that the nerf is good? Do you think they went a little bit overboard? Or do you think that it should have stayed the same? Because that is a valid opinion as well. Leave a like in the video. It genuinely really does help me out with the algorithm and stuff. I know all YouTubers say it. Subscribe if you're new. Join in with the streams in the description down below. I'm live every single day at 6 p.m. game time. Join the Discord, and without further ado, let's just get into the video. So first things first, I kind of want to clarify something. I know that it's still useful, and I know that there are still niche uses for it, right? Like, I am by no means an endgame PVMer, but I am, I guess, better than mid-game, but not at endgame PVM. Like, I'm good, but I'm not really good at it. I'm better than average, but that's about where my skill lays. So I know that there's probably some uses for it, and there's probably some niche situations, but pretty much everyone was using it, and it was a little bit too overpowered, and that is okay. And also, another disclaimer, I also don't claim to be a game developer or know how to develop games or balancing or whatever. I just simply don't know. All I know is from what I see on Runescape, but also from what I know from like other games that I play. I've been following gaming for years and years and years. I'm interested in it. I watch videos on it. So that's kind of what I'm basing my opinion on. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before anyone starts to comment about it. And I don't want to just hate on the developers either, because I'm preaching not to do it, and I don't want to do it myself. But I generally do feel, by the looks of things, like Jagex either releases something in a broken state and then nerfs it into oblivion, or the other way around. Let's take the Ring of Death as a good example, right? Before it released, you pretty much were able to tank all the ridiculously difficult mechanics at bosses. It would proc the ring, but with animate death especially, you would barely be taking any damage, and you could pretty much skip that mechanic and just finish off the boss fight. A great example is P7 Zami. It has a very high damaging, it's called a soft insta-kill apparently, mechanic that does 7 or 8k damage if you don't pray correctly and use your vitality pot. And the way that you could just deal with it with the Ring of Death is just face tank it and keep on doing DPS, because you would just be getting your health back and it would just be completely fine, and you would easily be able to do P7 Zami that way. But it could also 100% tank full-on insta-kill mechanics from different types of bosses. And another thing that happened is when the boss faces with a cutscene, so for example, Talos falling into the rift at 100%, you would genuinely be having a reset on the ring as well, which is a little bit too powerful too. So pretty much what they did is nerfed it into oblivion, because that's exactly it. No more insta-kill mechanic is good, in my opinion. Like, being able to just cheese full-on insta-kill mechanics, like the pizza slice at Zuck, or the insta-kill mechanic at Telos, or the insta-kill mechanic at KK. I understand that you should not be face tanking those by just being or wearing this ring. Like, I don't think that is good. However, I do think that you should be able to use it on a very high hitting hit, whether that's the 7-8k hit from Chevalric in P7 at 100% in rage, of course, or if it's the Ice Prison at next, whatever it is. That should generally be a thing, in my personal opinion, because that makes it learner-friendly, but it also makes it a little bit so that you actually want to learn the mechanic and have a chance of learning the mechanic, because I felt like the design of it, at least when it released, was just the Ring of Death is going to be the learner ring, and then as soon as you know it, you switch over to your DPS ring to do better kills and easier kills, etc, etc. But that's not the only thing they did, because if they just did it with the no more insta-kill mechanic, that is completely fine. Even if they just removed the facing mechanic, which they also did, by the way, that it doesn't reset on faces, that would also been a great fix. And they could have stopped there, but no, they didn't. They also made it so that the bleed that you get is 20% of the killing blow. An example is, if you get a 7k hit, the bleed will be 1400 damage. And I think that a great fix would have just been is removing the animate dead effect. So animate dead actually applied to the bleed, making the bleed very just ignorable when it comes to the Ring of Death effect. You could just literally just out DPS it because the bleed was non-existent pretty much if you use animate depth. They could have just used that and put it in line with range and melee, because from what I've seen and from the things I've tested, it's a lot less punishing, or a lot more punishing with range and melee, how it used to be, than it was with magic, right? But another thing that they did, because that's not where they stopped, they also made it so your Sign of Life procs before your ring. So that means you have 0 adrenaline, and it's just, yeah, it's just, no. Like, even give us a toggle or something, because I've read on Twitter from like high-level PVMs that there are some situations where that actually could be good. But in general, just give us an option to do it, because when you have 0 adrenaline, for example, at Zamorak P7, where it would proc your ring, there's just no point, because 1, you'll be getting too much bleed damage, and 2, you have 0 adrenaline, so there's no use for it anyway. So 3, why would you use it, right? Sure, you would save death cost, but death cost is so low right now. And I think that this is just a great example of just doing too much. In my personal opinion, as I said, above average PVMer, removed the insta-kill mechanic cheeses, made it so that animate death didn't affect the bleed damage, and just make it so that the phases don't reset the ring, and that would have been a great fix. I still think it would be quite powerful then, but it would not be overpowered as it used to be. And that sparks the bigger discussion, right? A lot of people are saying they didn't test this. They didn't even think this through, but I generally think that they did. And I think that we do need to see it from their perspective. Sure, people would argue that they didn't properly test it because they would find out all these exploits that people are using it for when they are testing it properly. And you could say that that is a valid argument. I guess a good QA tester would test a piece of content so thoroughly that anything that a player ever could come up with would not be in the game. And that is exactly what QA testing should be, but what it isn't anymore. There's a great video on this by Josh Strive Hayes, which I actually will link in the description down below, that speaks about this and pretty much how game development money allocation has changed over the years, shifting it more to, well, actually developing the game, but also MTX. And I know MTX is always the thing and the evilness in every single game, but it just is the truth, and that's just how gaming is nowadays. Whether it's RuneScape, whether it's Call of Duty, whether it's any game that you play out there. So there's less development time for QA testing, so they need to test more efficiently. They need to make sure that it works, that it does what they think it does, and they can't think of every single solution that the players could think of. And even so, I would also argue that even if you get a lot of development time, you can still not think of every solution, because it is probably a team of like maybe 10 people compared to thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people just trying this in all different sorts of ways, and the various ways as well, because yeah, people are nefarious and people will find ways to exploit this. And I do think that there is some argument there, but at the same time, they did think it through. But I also feel like they didn't think it properly through when it comes to the nerf, because this is not the first time that Jagex did this. It's a bigger issue, I feel like, when they buff or nerf things. I feel like Jagex is too scared to release a piece of content being mediocre or even whatever. So they're either having something overpowered, like this Ring of Death, so people are actually excited about it and be like talking about it and are excited and want to use it, or they release something so just underwhelming that they seem to be scared of it being too overpowered. And I feel like this is just a trend within the game overall. And I'm very curious to see in the comment section down below from you guys what are like good examples. One that I saw when I posted the tweet was Dreadnips, that they were really powerful when they released, and now they're just kind of underwhelming as well. And the same with the Crocs Knights in the Garden of Grid, is they were extremely overpowered when they released, and then after release they are pretty much, or after the nerf, they are pretty much irrelevant because everything else is better. And they struggle with finding a middle ground, clearly. And I generally think that, as I said earlier, I don't claim that balancing in a game is very easy, and everyone has opinions on it. But I feel like, especially with a lot of PVM things, it's just something that they just don't seem to be thinking it through and have double standards with it. Because they talked about the Fracture Staff of Armadyl. They said that the Fracture Staff of Armadyl still, even after like a slight nerf that they did, which I think is an example of a good nerf, is still too overpowered for what it should be, right? Like, it is very overpowered for a tier 95 weapon. And they said that technically it needs a nerf, but they don't want to because so many people bought into it. So many people spent billions and billions of GP on this item, and they don't want to devalue that for people, which I think is really fair. So why would you do it with the Ring of Death? I know it's not that expensive, and I mean, I personally don't care about the 80 million GP or whatever that I lost because of it, because I already had it to begin with. But let's say I bought it, I wouldn't care too much because I can make the money back easy. But there are people that might have seen this ring and be like, yo, this is my chance to finally learn PVM. And trust me, there's probably a lot of people who thought that thought, finally, I can get this ring. There's now a use because before the dev cost wasn't even that high anyway, because they were lower level PVMers, and now they can do more difficult bosses. I've seen a lot of people just on my Twitter timeline, right? And I know that's not a great source, but they were just saying, I couldn't do this boss, I couldn't do that boss, and now I could because the ring, and now I'm stuck again not being able to do it. And sure, some of it is cheesing the boss, but some of it was actually realistically learning it by using the effect to your advantage. And I think that this update caters more to like the higher level people than necessarily lower and mid-level players, where I feel like the initial design was actually for them. And it's an argument I saw as well, is that they listen to the high level PVMers and streamers and whatever, but also a moderator debunked that on Twitter, Mod Shogun. So it's a discussion that is out there and probably needs its own video, quite frankly, because I feel like that deserves a lot of research and needs some actual solid proof to be throwing out serious accusations like that, because I generally think there's some truth to it, because obviously a creator does have a platform and creators are in contact with Jagex, so it's easier for them to tell Jagex about issues that are going on to just average Johnny playing the game. However, there's also an argument to be made that they should be listening to the average Johnnies because, well, they are the average players and they're the common players. But yeah, I think it's just a very interesting discussion in general, with Jagex releasing something in a very overpowered state and then nerfing it into the ground, or the other way around, just releasing something very underwhelming and then buffing it and then being super overpowered. If you have good examples, and if there's enough examples of it in the comment section down below, I'll definitely make a full-on video on it, because I think it's a genuine, interesting discussion. But I want to know what you think in the comment section down below about this whole discussion. Do you agree with what I said? Do you not agree with what I said? What is your own opinion on it? And leave a like if you did enjoy the video, subscribe if you're new. My name's Chevalric, and see you guys in my next video. Kapow!